This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
The biggest icon in podcasting.
Welcome everybody to this week's edition of Doc and Jock. I am the Doc, John Macaroon, recovering from the Christmas holiday. Boy, do I get a chance to rub it in the face of my guy Adam, the Jock Strozinski. Why do you ask? Well, for the past couple weeks, he's been telling me, believe, John, believe, like in Santa Claus, believe, like in the Easter Bunny. I'm like, dude, cuz I'm 42 years old. I don't believe in fucking Santa Claus. So I told him, be careful. The Detroit Lions, yes, they're playing better. Yes, they're a better football team, but you cannot expect a football team to run the table, especially with the same level of hunger that the Carolina Panthers brought to the table. And what happened? A major letdown. We're going to break it all down over the next 30, 35 minutes. An abbreviated edition this week because it's the holidays and we're all recovering. But before we get into the Lions, cuz I have to ask you, I was gripping more than my wife was. She made epic mistakes of epic proportions in fantasy football, benching players that are known commodities. When I found out my wife benched TJ Hawkinson, I said, Andrea, what are you doing? This is crunch time. You're going up against Adam. He's formidable. You can't bench Hawkinson for whoever the guy I've never heard of from the Saints. And she's like, I know, but Hawkinson's been sucking lately. I didn't trust him. And I'm gripping, I'm watching as we went somewhere on Monday, and I'm driving home and I'm looking at it. I'm like, oh shit, he's really catching up. He's close. I thought realistically you were going to kick her ass, but you had the Colts, two players in a tight end, Moss and Michael Pittman, and they weren't doing shit. You saw, I heard on the radio reports that Nick Foles threw 3 interceptions. He was horrible. And in the end, in the semifinals of the biggest fantasy league game ever, you tied my wife at 104.5, which kicked into the standard ESPN tiebreaker, which is the higher seed. How did it feel? I kind of feel, I know you know football. You weren't too confident going into that. And then to watch that performance, all you needed was a half yard more and you advance. How did it feel? Because in my mind, in the history of our family league, that's the worst loss in any kind of way possible. But I got to ask, how did it feel to lose like that, cuz?
Yeah, it was a bad beat, that's for sure. I'll be honest with you. I watched probably the first quarter and a half of that football game on Monday night, and then I shut it off and I was like, I'll be surprised with whatever takes
happens.
place. Yeah. And look, I built my draft around a lot of players with a lot of upside.
Yes.
And Michael Pittman was one of those guys. I thought he was a guy who had a lot of upside. I thought he was going to have a really good year. And I've been so disappointed by him. I used him in both of my leagues. In both of my leagues, I made crucial mistakes this past weekend that cost me chances to play in championship games. And it sucks, man. Like, it was absolutely brutal. I ended up waking up, I go to bed extra early because I wake up at 4 a.m. for work, and I ended up waking up at, I think it was like 11, maybe 11:15. I heard my phone vibrating on my console, on my end table next to me, and I was like, what time is it? And I checked my insulin pump, and I was like, gotta be John. I had to have lost. I'll figure it out tomorrow morning, and I'll deal with it then. And then I wake up at 4 a.m, and about 4:30 or so, I check my phone as I'm getting my coffee ready, and I was like your message was like, it looked like it was like if somebody ties, what happens or whatever. And then I go and I check fantasy football, and I was like, man, that sucks. This is a bad beat, man.
No, because we didn't know. No, a tie. We're like, what the hell happens? And
just
so
a bad beat.
Yeah, I Googled what happens, and I love it. I want to.
If you go to the league settings tell you.
Yeah. I looked in regards to how it is. I'm like, well, because you're the league manager, you have the right to potentially look at it or have set it to be something different. I love it. Higher seed advances. Let's keep it that way forever. I think it's great because if it would have went to bench points or something else, because we don't know. I've never seen a tie ever in a game of that magnitude. And I'm like, Andrea, I think you won. I think it says in standard leagues, we're standard, that we didn't vote on it. We never talked about it. Who the hell advances? I looked and I said, is this what we're doing in the league? So you only look at it when it applies to stuff that happens. So I was shocked. Of course, I'm more nerve-wracked than she is, but obviously you're competitive and you want her to win, and it's good. And, it's unfortunate, that both of you made mistakes on your bench. You left Cam Akers that you picked up from myself, and you took him off the scrap heap only to watch him score 35 points, but on your bench. And she left Singletary and Hawkinson on her bench. So both of you played subpar, but in the end, the higher seed wins, and it'll be the 1 and 2 seeds. And in the end, it's right. They had the best team. My wife had the most scoring team in the league. And Brian has just been on fire the last 2 years. So that's really, in the end, no disrespect, but she had the best team, and now it'll be the matchup of the two best teams, and we'll see what happens. But holy cow, man, 104.5 to 104.5. I have it saved in one of the brutalest losses you're going to take, just like the Detroit Lions, in that I told you guys, Doc told you, be careful. I'm not jumping on the playoff bandwagon just yet. There are flaws to this football team. There are things that happen that can potentially be scary for this Detroit Lions team. Now, for those of you that tend to wallow in the pity of the Detroit Lions, look, they are a different football team. It's not the same old Lions, but it's the way I'll describe it, it's the same old loss. In that what you see is a big game moment where the Lions have to step up, and not only do they not compete, they get dominated and exposed in all of their flaws, which is so shocking to me because I'm just so surprised. I want to get your reaction to how you took that loss. I mean, the game was over at halftime. The first couple of plays that the Panthers ran were very indicative of what was going to happen. They just came out and said, mano a mano, we're going to punch you in the face. And Dan Campbell acknowledged it after the loss. He went right up to the coach and said, you kicked our ass, good on you, and walked right off. And that's what it was. I was disappointed because if you ask me, all the games beforehand obviously led up to a big moment for the Lions. But if you're not going to ball out and play like the Panthers did with the opportunity that everyone's writing about it. Everyone knows every scenario, every inch of what you need. Everyone knew that if the Seattle Seahawks lost and the Commanders lost and the Giants lost, you would be in the playoffs. I am just shocked at how do you not appear to play at the same hair on your fire level with what's at stake. I'm shocked, cuz. What was your reaction to the Lions' 2-touchdown loss? Disappointing performance, getting their ass kicked and dominated by the Panthers.
I'll be honest with you, man. What took place on Christmas Eve really kind of set the tone for Saturday evening, Sunday, and rolling into Monday, and you can wrap it up with my fantasy team. Well, what took place on Saturday afternoon with that Lions game was disgusting. It was gross. It was upsetting. It was frustrating. It was basically a lump of coal in your stocking. And I think the thing about it that really bothered me, and we talked a little bit on Christmas Eve because I didn't get to see you on Christmas Eve this year. It was the way that Carolina just manhandled Detroit. They just out-physicaled them. They punched them in the face, and Detroit had no response. Detroit looked like a lost child. Detroit looked like what Minnesota looked like. Detroit looked like what some of the teams that Detroit has just annihilated in this stretch that they've been on looked like. They got hit in the mouth, and they had no answer. There was no recourse. It was almost like Carolina took their soul. If you've ever been in a fight with somebody else and you've got hit that first time, it kind of wakes you up, and then you hit them, and you can see something will sometimes trigger in you, and something will die in them. And in the Detroit Lions, I feel like Carolina punched them in the face, and Carolina looked them dead in the eyes, and something died in Detroit. They did not want to fight. They did not want any of that noise. They wanted none of the smoke, and it was just a complete pounding. And you look at what happened with that defense. Carolina just gashed Detroit. It wasn't like Carolina was able to run on Detroit. Carolina gashed Detroit. It wasn't like 5 yards here. No, it was 35 yards here, 35 yards there, 25 yards here. Detroit had no answer. They were befuddled. They were lost. They had no heart. And look, this is probably the most concerning thing about all of this. Because as this team is going to progress and as the stakes are going to get higher, you can't have this happen. But this is at least the second time that this has happened this year where this team has looked like they haven't had a pulse. This is at least the third time that I can recall in this regime under Dan Campbell where this has happened, where this team has showed up and has just been shell-shocked. Yeah, they kind of came back and they put some points up on in the second half, but you're right. This game was over by halftime. This game was done. There was no rebuttal from Detroit. And this is, again, the second time this season, the third time under Dan Campbell, where you can say that this team has just not showed up. They just haven't had any guts. There hasn't been any gusto. There hasn't been anything. And I think that is probably the most concerning thing. But the fact that this team was out physicaled at the point of attack is what really, really shook me and really shocked me. And I was just like, we haven't seen this. We haven't seen this in such a long time. And this team looked pitiful. They looked like they were boys amongst men. And that was probably the most disheartening part of all of it. And I'll be honest with you. I'll be absolutely honest with you. When this game was unfolding and at the very end of it all, out loud I was like, this has that feel of same old Lions. And we've been trying to kind of put this to rest. The team's been trying to put that to rest. But honestly, this was a game where all you had to do was win. Like, the board fell for you. The board fell for you the way it was supposed to fall. Like, perfectly. Seattle lost. Washington lost. The Giants lost. Everybody in front of you lost. And it's set up for you to win your game in advance and get into the playoffs. And you shit the bed. And that's what same old Lions is. Like, same old Lions is inventing new ways to lose that have never been done before. And then a rule comes out and it overly penalizes you. Or it's having playoffs in your hand and you find some way to shit in that hand and not make it into the playoffs. That's what same old Lions is. Same old Lions is going out and compounding a bad situation and making it worse. And that's what you got on Saturday when the Lions took on Carolina. It was same old Lions. It felt very same old Lions. Now that being said, still early in the season, relatively speaking, you've got 2 games that you can make up. But now what you've done is you've taken a situation that could have been a lot of fun to watch them get into the playoffs, and now you've cranked up the heat and you've turned it up to 12, and you have to now win out. And especially with Green Bay making a push. Like, Aaron Rodgers looks absolutely lifeless, but you mentioned the Detroit Lions, and there's a spark in this man's eye, and it looks like he's just been freebasing crack, and he's ready to go. He's got his crackhead strength, and he wants to pound you. So good luck with that when you take them on in Week 17. So this is absolutely frustrating. This was so disheartening, and it was bad because it was everything that we've been fighting against. And you're right, man. You said it right. You said, look, don't be so quick to count those chickens before they're hatched. Yeah. And I was over there counting chickens, man. I was counting 10 games is what I was counting. I thought they were going to win 10.
It's tough, man, because I thought the ultimate pain was going to come against the Packers, and it still could. But it just had to feel that the Lions were going to come down to earth, because I think what probably started the tidal wave in the negative direction, they get out on the field, and Aiden Hutchinson falls flat on his face, freaks out because the playing surface is like concrete. And I think psychologically they freaked out. And the Panthers are used to it. They're used to playing on some janky-ass surface, and they're ready to roll. Whereas the Lions, they got a bunch of guys that are potentially avoidant of not wanting to re-injure themselves, and you got everyone flailing around and not willing to be physical. I think it got into their heads, the playing surface. And then, too, right away, I think the Panthers were playing like their contracts were based on it. They came out and they were flying. The offensive line was just brutally dominant against the Lions' defensive line, and the Lions didn't have any answers. And what stinks is, you look at it and you say, in that game, the Lions kind of did weather the storm, after getting punched in the face, they marched the ball down the field steadily, and then the fumbled exchange between Ragnow and Goff, which is just a momentum killer.
It kind of felt like that was the moment that really pivoted.
That was it.
Like after that, the game, like it was done.
It was done. It was done. And it was a SOL type loss for a young team, but I look at it like it was something that just maybe will be used as a wake-up call. The true SOL was on Christmas Day, where the Packers win. You didn't want that to happen. You didn't want the Rams to kick the ass of another football team in the Broncos. They kicked their ass. So not only did you potentially get fucked now in the postseason with the Packers now coming up as well, you get fucked in the draft. You lost 3 spots. So it just came out after a great weekend last weekend. You come out this weekend and it's a total abysmal situation. But I think the Lions will rebound, having the game at home. And look, I don't do the whole, well, if you told me they were going to be at this point in time, a couple games out, half game out, would you take it? Look, I had the Lions 8-9, but not in the postseason. So I wasn't disappointed. I saw that game, and the reason why I can acknowledge that SOL is not dead was I wasn't even surprised. When I saw that shit go down, I'm like, I've seen this shit 40 times already. They get their ass beat. They don't play competitive. They're not playing well. And it's a must-win game, and they don't step it up. So we've seen that before, so I wasn't emotionally pissed at that game. I'm upset that they didn't take advantage of a situation that could have had them in the postseason. But you look at it and you say, you told me last week, hey, John, this is a playoff team. I said, cause it's not. You can't have it's a playoff offense. I would take that offense to any game. I would avoid, and I asked the question on Twitter specifically, and people kind of were like, what the hell are you talking about at Detroit Podcast? I said, would you want this Lions team in the postseason? And I'd say no, because the risk of having that same performance happen to you against the Vikings and the 49ers or the Cowboys or the Eagles is very high. And I don't want to see the Lions get blown out 52-12 in the postseason. The defense is not playoff caliber. It's just not. You need like 3 more players at a high level to even get to the point where you could say, okay, let's compete and see what happens. So for me, it's just going to be a very uphill climb. It's 20% that this Lions team makes the postseason. I think they'll go 1-1 and they'll finish the year out 8-9, and it'll be a good year. But at this point in time, it just sucks because you had it right there and you didn't step it up. You didn't find the extra juice. I mean, we got extra juice now trying to record a podcast in the middle of a holiday, but the Lions, with everything on the line for them, couldn't get it done, and it's just shocking.
To me, this is probably the most frustrating part about all of it, right? Is when this team was 1-6, it was whatever. But your expectations change, and they're allowed to change as the team performs and shows you something. And this was a game where they could have came out and they could have really solidified what they wanted to be, what they're choosing to be. And instead, what they do is they come out and they lay an egg. And going back to your comment about the field, and the field being hard or them not really being prepared for it, this is one of the first times where you can say this Detroit team appears to be soft under Dan Campbell. This team appears to lack that intestinal fortitude, those guts. And that's something that I never thought we would really say about a Dan Campbell team, right? That you can say that they're not necessarily prepared well, or you can say that his time management puts this team in bad spots, or you can say that this team just doesn't have the talent to compete with other teams. But to go out and afterwards come out and complain about the field, suck it up. Like, let's go. Like, Carolina didn't have a problem with it. Carolina had no problem with it as they were cutting through you guys like a hot knife through butter. Like, no issues there. To me, this all goes back to the coaching and to those players holding each other accountable and basically gut checking each other. And it's frustrating to be in this spot because you're right. You could be on your way to the playoffs, right? And the expectations are allowed to change. That's the great thing about sports. That's the great thing about having basically 2 seasons, right? In one, having splitting your season in half like this. And this team had a chance to really capitalize on that, and they let it slip through their fingers. And it's absolutely frustrating. And look, I think a lot offensively early on, you had to have some concerns with Jared Goff. And this is my issue, right? We talked about this a couple weeks ago. Jared Goff in the cold doesn't perform well, right? Obviously, he's an indoor quarterback, or this guy's got to be playing in perfect weather. And you're starting to see some of the issues here. Cold weather, right? 32 degrees in Carolina. I think with the wind chill, it felt like it was 20. Not horribly cold, not especially after what we just went through, where it was like, I don't know, negative 35 degrees outside with the wind chill. But he struggles to connect with his more speedy receivers. I've had concerns with him and DJ Shark for a while now. It always seems like DJ Shark has to kind of pull up and turn around and then locate the ball and then adjust to make that reception. He can never get hit in stride. Now you're going to add in somebody who's faster in Jamison Williams, a guy who's got speed to burn, a guy who's going to race down the field. And it just seems like Jared Goff, that rapport with specifically those two wide receivers just isn't there. Am I making a bigger deal out of this, or do you have any concerns with Jared Goff, his deep ball, the accuracy with the deep ball, him being able to get the ball downfield and really open up this playbook? Because that's been the whole talk. There are plays built in for J-Mo. There are plays built in for DJ Shark to really utilize their speed and really help take the top off the defense. Well, you can only really do that if your quarterback has the ability to do that. And recently, Jared Goff hasn't really shown that. On top of that, playing in the cold, remember, you got a game in Lambeau Field coming up, and there could be some very heavy playoff implications riding on that. And you got to count on this guy to help get you a win in that cold weather. Good luck at this moment in time. Do you have any concerns with any of this, or is it just kind of me making a bigger deal out of nothing?
No, Jared Goff, listen, he's the least of the Lions' problems. I think you can build around him to have some success, at least in the postseason. The ultimate success, I don't know. I'm of the opinion that you could get better, but it's going to take forever. So if you're not patient and you want the Lions to have success, you should root for Jared Goff, because I think he gives you the fastest chance to at least get to the postseason next year and maybe win a game or two. And then hopefully in a couple years, if there's just one guy out there that the Lions view to be special, that can make the throws, handle the pressure, and extend plays with his feet, if you can find the total package, maybe a diamond in the rough that eventually can be a legendary quarterback, then you go out and get him. But right now, Jared Goff, that's the problem. And here's the thing, okay? And football, the blessing of watching film, the blessing of being able to go back and watch, is the formulas out there on how to limit Jared Goff. But the problem is other defenses have a hard time doing it when the Lions offense is rolling. The key is you pressure Jared Goff. You get in his face. You rattle him a little bit. You get to him early. And then he'll start spraying the football around. I mean, look, the one target to your Ferrari engine, Jamison Williams, was a ball that was basically hopped to him. And you don't go back to him, which I think will change moving forward. You're going to have to target your weapons to get the job done. But what happens in a game? That game was a playoff game. Okay? Because you've been telling us, Dan Campbell, the Lions, that basically every week is a playoff week. Well, in the next round of the playoffs, you're on the road, and it's a cold environment in Carolina, and you're a team that's supposed to be smash mouth. And what happens? You got punked. You didn't respond. You make the critical error. And that's the odds indicate, okay, guys, and you can be a fan and just say everything positive and spin it the way you want. But the reality is, in big moments, in the biggest moments, that is typically what happens to Jared Goff. Something weird happens, a turnover happens at the inopportune times, the throws just aren't there, the big plays just aren't there. That's what tends to happen in the biggest of big games. That's what happened in the Super Bowl. Jared Goff had a chance to nail a wide open receiver. He missed him. And in the end, Bill Belichick exposed him for the situation that he's in right now, which is if you pressure him, he's going to get sacked and go down, or it's going to be incumbent upon him to kind of step his game up into A++ mode. And I don't think he has that fifth, sixth gear that you need. He's safe in third and fourth gear. You can win games with him. You can tailor a run game. You can kind of dink and dunk it through and have some deep plays to Shark and things like that. But you need a lot of things to go right, in my mind, for Jared Goff to be ultra successful. And sometimes there are just games where everybody else on the field, the other 52 guys, are just shitty. And the one guy that has to step up has to be Jared Goff. And he just got to just, for whatever reason, fits every throw where it needs to be. That was a game that a Jared Goff would have needed to elevate himself to play in sixth gear mode, where he just takes the game over and just does things where you're like, what the hell is going on? Like Mike White did in his first debut this year, where all of a sudden you're like, where the fuck did Mike White come from? He's just making the throws. The team looks good. Something happens. I don't know. Maybe Jared Goff needed to slam his helmet into somebody or point his finger or do something to kind of get the team going after that momentum changing situation. But I don't think he has it. I think that right now he's kind of the safe, comfortable quarterback that gets out there and wants the picture painted beautifully. Well, guess what? The NFL is taking your painting and pissing all over it and saying, hey, what are you going to do about it? You know what I mean? And Jared Goff stares and is like, you pissed on my painting. And you're like, yeah, Jared, go out there and knock some guy out. And he's like, but they pissed on my painting. Why'd they do that? And you're like, okay, Jared, let's go. Let's get out there and let's run another 3-yard check down to Amon Ra and see if we can get 5 yards, yard after catch. That's all it is. You want Jared to be a little bit more of a guy to take control of that offense. He just doesn't have it just yet. But bro, I'm not going to discount what he's done, dude. You get 7-8 wins out of this team with the youth that they got, with the horrible defense that they still roll with the defensive backs that need more upgrade. Give them the credit, man. They started off horrible. It would have been easy for them to roll over. They put together a winning streak, and that's why I'm of the opinion, I put out a mock draft. Maybe you take a running back with that number 7 pick. Maybe you take another weapon. You give him the supreme team, and then you go maybe offense first with the first pick, and then a lot of defensive players the rest of the way. But man, it's disappointing in that, like you said, it shakes your playoff confidence with this team, because at one point you were like, this team could do something if they could just step it up. But it takes a big step back when a team does that to you, and a team that had 5 wins, a team that was playing well for their coach, but a team that I think on paper you're better than. Sam Darnold, we all looked at and said, that's kind of like a Zach Wilson. But now he steps it up and has the opportunity just to hand it off and make some plays and be mobile. It just shook my playoff confidence now going into the Bears, where it's crazy. Going into the game against the Bears, I think that the Lions are better than the Bears. But I watched that game again that they just had with the Bears earlier in the year, and because they only won by a point, and they got lucky because the Bears fucked up an extra point. So I'm nervous that this game against the Bears could go in a cockeyed direction. I don't know. Do you think this Lions team can rebound, get off the mat after a shitty performance?
I think we're going to learn a lot about this team with this game this week. And again, you go back to the Carolina game. You got punched in the face and you got pile driven, and you had really no response. So how do you come back from that? And I think Dan Campbell does a good job after getting embarrassed, because that's what they were. They were embarrassed this previous week, of getting this team refocused and redialed in. The problem is you can't have that. Like you need to be focused all the time. You need to take care of your business. Not necessarily expecting this team to rattle off 10 wins in a row. Would have been nice, but here's the thing. I think they will bounce back this week, and I think they will take care of the Bears. Playoff confidence, obviously, it should be shaken, because if you look at kind of the way things are now unfolding, putting a lot more emphasis on what's going to take place in week 17 or in week 18 when you go to Green Bay. Again, you got to travel to Lambeau Field. You got to play in whatever the weather conditions are going to be. Already discussed Jared Goff not necessarily being great outside in the cold. So these are things that you have to start to kind of factor in, and those are things that stack up against you a little bit. And especially when you've got to go and you've got to play a pretty perfect game. I think this team bounces back this week. And I think they get things right. I think they get back to 500, and I think it makes for a much more meaningful game the following week when they take on Green Bay. But if you're a Detroit Lions fan, I feel like your confidence needs to be rattled just a little bit. But I think the one thing about Dan Campbell that he has done exceptionally well, when this team gets their shit pushed in, he does a good job of getting them redialed back in, refocused, and really setting that expectation for them to come out. And look, yeah, you're right. They won by 1 point when they played the Bears the last time they played them. But I think this game at home, I think this team playing with a little bit more gusto, I think the Bears are still kind of trying to figure out what the Bears want to be and how the Bears want to function as a team. I think Detroit gets this done. I think Detroit wins this game. And I don't necessarily know if it's close. I don't necessarily know if it's by a field goal. I think this team wins this game by 10 points. I think you're looking at a game that'll be somewhere in the neighborhood of 24-14. I think Detroit gets it done, and like I said, it makes for a very interesting Week 18. We'll have a lot to unpack coming back next week when Detroit has to travel to Lambeau and take on Aaron Rodgers and Green Bay. And look, Aaron Rodgers seems like he's got a little bit of a fire lit underneath him. That being said, he's still not playing great. Like, he's doing just enough to help this team eke out wins. So it'll be interesting to kind of see what takes place. And also, it'll be interesting to kind of see how every team that's above Detroit handles their business and whether some of them collapse and fold up. So it'll be interesting to kind of see what takes place, especially next week. We'll have a really interesting picture with this playoffs.
Yes. I want to ask you this because everyone in Detroit should panic a little bit. Guess why? If the Lions lose and the Seahawks and the Giants and Commanders have a nice week, because remember, the Seahawks play the Jets. And even though Mike White is cleared to play, maybe he brings them back. Maybe he doesn't. Maybe he struggles. Maybe the Jets' confidence has been rattled. If the Seahawks win and you lose, you're going to have the opportunity to say that you've been eliminated officially from the postseason. So a loss to the Bears could potentially end the playoff talk. So that's why it's a big game.
Yep.
I think the Lions end up winning. It's just a team that's more talented. I think that the Lions know that they got to step it up. The home crowd 1-1, New Year's Day, they're going to be rabid. I don't think that you're going to have a letdown. I think Jameson Williams will step up, DJ Chark. You realize that it was a one-game setback. It happens in the NFL. But I did want to ask you this before we get out of here. Who do you blame more? Do you blame Dan Campbell for not having the team ready to go, like with that fire? Or do you say, you know what? It looked like a collective effort. It looked like a team maybe that was reading a little bit too much of their clippings and saying, hey, that if we just don't put in that extra effort that we need against a hungry team, that maybe they needed to kind of face that. Because remember, it's a young team. It's a team that still has huge holes on defense that you recognize are a problem when you're starting Ifeatu Melifonwu and Kirby Joseph at safety. Yes, they have talent, but that's a lot of things that can be exposed. And Malcolm Rodriguez is a rookie, and these guys are still inexperienced. They're going to have games. You would not like it to see it. You would not like it to be an ass kicking, but I can understand it. I don't feel like I blame Dan Campbell for it. I think that it's incumbent upon the players to understand that, hey, you were given a task to stop the run. How do you not do it? Now, some people say it was shitty coaching with the strategy that they tried to deploy to stop the run. I can see some of that, but it's not Dan Campbell's fault that Alex Anzalone was sticking to his defender and was locked up and couldn't break free from the blocks. It wasn't his fault that Malcolm Rodriguez and Jeff Okudah were flailing and not physical and were diving at people instead of fundamentally wrapping up. It's not his fault when you look at the film. So for me, I think that it's not so much on Dan Campbell. I think he has good game plans. And in the end, the players needed to own this one and really get back this week and turn the tide.
I think a lot of what you've seen defensively, I think some of it was scheme, but I think a lot of it was this team just had their heart ripped out of them.
Yeah,
and
they sure did.
They couldn't find that level, that drive, that want to, you know? Like, the one thing you can say about this team, it's what they've preached all year. It's the crap that you've seen on the HBO show. It is that grit. It is the willingness to do more, right? To dig down deep and find that next level, right? Whatever it is that you've got, you somehow figure out a way to get 10% more and give that much more. And in this game, this team just didn't have it. Like, it just wasn't there. And you and I both know this team isn't talented enough to not be able to do that. This team isn't talented enough to roll out Melifonwu or roll out Jeff Okuda, who looks like he's on ice skates, or roll out Aiden Hutchinson, who falls flat on his face and he's upset because the ground's a little bit hard. Like, this team's not good enough. They don't have enough talent to be able to go out there and basically win on name alone, go out there and be able to just, whatever the scheme is, just show up and kind of fill your gap. Like, no, you've got to give more. This team, that's one thing this team has done when they're winning games. They're giving more. They're out hustling, they're out playing, they're out punching, they're out kicking other guys, other teams, and that's what they didn't do in this game. But I didn't really like what I seen. Is we're going to get a little nerdy about it. I didn't really like X's and O's wise. What I got from the defense, I felt like they were put in bad spots. I don't necessarily know if Aaron Glenn did his best work that day. I felt like there were things that could have been done better.
Yeah, no, I think that will probably be acknowledged today when you guys listen. Aaron Glenn and Ben Johnson talk on Thursday, so we'll see how they respond and how they tackle some of the challenges and some of the issues that were presented. I think on the offensive side, the run game is lacking. Obviously DeAndre Swift just hasn't been able to get out of third gear for the better part of 2-3 weeks, and then Jamal Williams just at times, when the offensive line isn't clicking on all cylinders, you're then starting to see 2nd and 9, 2nd and 8, and you need to get those. You need to get ahead of the sticks quite often, and they just weren't able to. It just had the feel of the Lions getting bullied, man. Someone came and said, "We are not going to let you come into our house and punk us." And to be honest, I think in a unique way, it also shows the level of respect that NFL teams start to have, and to say, okay, these guys are coming here to fight, so we're going to have to bring a super fight, and this is our home turf, and these guys are not fucking around. So I think that Steve Wilkes, in a unique kind of way, paid the Lions the ultimate respect by saying, we need to dominate these guys, because if we don't, we're going to get our ass kicked. And in a way, I think that mano a mano, we've seen that before. The Lions have been able to do it where they were able to go in and just punk a team. But when it happens to you, man, it's not a good feeling. So now the Lions, it's incumbent on them to turn around and handle their business against the Chicago Bears. And I think it will. When you get your ass kicked like that, when everybody's going to talk about it for 7 days, I think the Lions potentially could have an opportunity to win by 2 touchdowns against the Chicago Bears, as long as they get out to an early lead. And then again, cuz I always look at it like, when you have an opportunity, in this game against the Bears, it could start right with the opening kick, the opening coin toss. If you win the toss, take the football. Don't put your defense out there first. Take the opportunity to have your offense get out there and score points, because I think that will signify potentially that, hey, we're here and come at us. So I'm predicting a win. I think it'll be comfortable. I think the Lions are going to rebound, and I save the ultimate pain for the season finale, when you got to go to Lambeau and your balls and nuts are going to be shriveled up, and you potentially, I think the Lions will have a win in you're in, lose in you're out scenario, and then we'll test it. We'll see. We'll see what happens in the cold, freezing tundra of Lambeau Field. Maybe even flexed to the primetime spot for the whole fucking country to see what we're about, and we'll see in the new year what it will bring. I'm hoping. You got to win. So let's see. Everybody, thank you guys for the support in 2022. It was a fun year. Lots of love from you guys, even from overseas, telling us how our podcast makes your day, how our content is, something that you value. And Adam and I truly appreciate those kind of sentiments. And that's why we grind and figure out and work around our schedules and push it back and push it forward and figure out ways to record this, because you guys listen and you've made the Detroit Sports Podcast part of the Detroit sports scene. And now that podcasts have taken off and are really in the mainstream of traditional media, you've recognized those of us that have been here grinding for nearly a decade, broadcasting and having fun with Detroit sports. So thank you from the bottom of our hearts for hitting that download button, tuning in, hitting that tweet button, and sending us your opinion of our content. It's greatly appreciated, cuz it's been a fabulous year, a fun year. The Lions potentially are on the map. let's see what they do with it. Let's see how they handle a little more adversity as the pressure rises. Some, when the pressure rises, they kind of fall off. Others, when the heat rises, they bring out their best work. And let's see what happens, because 2023 is going to be spectacular. Let's get after it. Be safe on New Year's, and let's come back in 2023, hopefully having some meaningful football to talk about on a Sunday, maybe even in prime time. Cuz, let's get after it.